Hi there, everybody. I'm Jeff Mayers from WisPolitics.com here with our virtual DC event with Congressman Mark Pocan. We'll be with the congressman shortly, but need to thank our sponsors and talk about some upcoming programs. So this is our second virtual DC virtual event of the year, and we have to thank our sponsors for this event series that will be taking place this year: Exact Sciences, XL Energy, WPS Health Solutions, Michael Best, and Michael Best Strategies. Also, a special thanks to our partners for this event series. They helped launch this several years ago, and they're still great partners in this: UW-Madison and the University of Wisconsin Alumni Association. Thank you very much to our partners and sponsors. Upcoming events: on February 18th, the Joint Finance Committee co-chairs, both Republicans, because they control the legislature, will be commenting on Governor Evers' budget that is being introduced on February 16. On March 4th, we have the Democratic minority leaders. And on April 15th, we have the Senate Majority Leader, Devin LeMahieu. And now, welcome Congressman Mark Pocan, representing the Madison area's 2nd Congressional District. Hi, Congressman.
Hey, Jeff. Good to see you.
Good to see you. So I'm not sure which is more crazy, DC or Madison right now. So in Madison, there's the ongoing debate about Governor Evers' public health declarations and the mask mandate. And you've been watching a little bit of that on Wisconsin Eye. So being a former assembly member, what's your take?
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Thanks for leading with this. I kind of felt like Wisconsin Eye today is Channel Q, because I'm watching the QAnon phenomena we have in DC happening in Wisconsin. It is completely idiotic, beyond any reason, to end a mask mandate in Wisconsin right now for public health reasons. Very clearly, we are in a race right now between getting people vaccinated and new variants taking hold. And I've talked to Dr. Fauci now, it seems like once or twice a week, as we're now back to having science dictate what's happening at the federal level. And to suggest somehow, one, that the process is the issue is idiotic, because what people care about is getting back to normal, having a lake perch fish fry with a spotted cow on a Friday night with friends, not about what powers the governor has and whether or not you go through a rules committee process where Steve Nass, who probably wouldn't wear a mask if he was a doctor on an operating room, that is an idiotic suggestion that is anything normal. So, what they're doing is dangerous today, Jeff. And, I understand that, I'm watching the QAnon factor in Congress, and I know it also exists in the legislature. And I also know that Robin is smarter than this, but he has to appeal to, I guess, those elements in his caucus. But appealing to them right now has serious public health consequences. It means more people could get sick and more people could die. And we got to stop this idiocy. This is something right now, there should be no debate that the next 6 weeks are going to be some of the most crucial. It's a race between vaccinations and variants. And I don't know why they're betting on the variants. We should all be betting on the vaccinations. And, as someone who still, as you know, my heart is very much still in the legislature, in the Wisconsin state government, I'm really saddened to see what they're doing today. So thanks for allowing me to get that off of my chest. But, it really is a sad day because, I still communicate with many legislators. I still have a great respect for the institution, but today's not respect for the institution. Today's pure idiocy.
Okay, you mentioned Robin, and I have to make sure people know you're talking about Assembly Speaker Robin Vos, and you and he have a very good relationship forged from years in the legislature, many of them on the Finance Committee, and you actually did a commercial for a PSA with the speaker on wearing a mask, and we did one of these with him last week, and he says, well, yes, wearing a mask is important. This is about the governor overreaching, being a dictator.
Yeah, that's probably a great conversation for the members of the Republican caucus in the state legislature, but not such a great debate for the people of Wisconsin. And, I understand there's those pressures when you're leader because you've got some, just like right now, Kevin McCarthy is trying to battle the more normal mainstream Republicans with the QAnon. I mean, when the Tea Party suddenly are the moderates in your party, you got some pretty serious problems, right? And they're all dealing with that. But Robin is smarter. And I wish he would live up to what I know he knows in his heart. In that PSA, he said the right thing: always wear your mask. And for us to act in any other way about some other process argument is really dangerous. We'll get more people sick, and potentially people will die. And I just think right now is not the time for Channel Q.
All right. Well, speaking of Channel Q, you got your own Channel Q going on there in the House, and Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene and her comments, are really roiling through the membership. And there was a caucus on the Republican side yesterday, a very long caucus in which there was a vote on Liz Cheney, but not a vote per se on Greene. But you folks, the Democratic majority, plan today to vote on Representative Greene's committee status. Is that correct?
Yes, that's going to be the vote on the floor today.
And that's rather a sweeping, precedent-setting move, is it not? And could it not ruin whatever bipartisanship is still around?
Well, the problem is, if you've got someone who espouses these views and literally is putting out tweets about a bullet in the head of Speaker Pelosi, that's unprecedented, right? I've been very careful, Jeff. I haven't signed on to any of these resolutions because I try to respect the institution as much as I think, in my view, it should be. And many of her comments were previous to getting elected. The problem is she's continuing it once she's elected. So even though she had the incredibly immature action of trying to fight with a 17-year-old who had been part of a shooting, to put her on the education committee is a terrible lack of judgment from Kevin McCarthy, the Republican leader. But clearly, he had to go and kiss the ring of Donald Trump last week at Mar-a-Lago. They're still having this inner war within the Republican Party. So rather than dealing with her like they did with King from Iowa, they're just letting it pass. And the problem is the tensions are still pretty high here from January 6th. You saw, I think, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez tell her story this week in a very emotional and personal way. And, I can tell you, it is very thick with feelings still of what happened, that day. And I think for the Republican Party not to have the common sense to act on this like they did previously has forced the hand for us to try to act and try to do what they should have did responsibly.
Okay, just for those tuning in, I asked some questions at the beginning, and then we get to some questions that you folks submitted when you registered for this event. So I'll get to those in a little bit. Let's talk about the vaccine rollout. You mentioned Dr. Fauci and mask wearing, and the whole vaccine rollout it's been a little rocky. Let's face it. Not just in Wisconsin, but in other places. What's your explanation for that, and is it getting better?
Well, a couple things. One, we should have had a national strategy, not leave this up to every state to have their own plan, like we did with testing, which failed miserably. So, that's a big part of the problem. There never was a national plan. When we thought there was a stockpile to release, we found out there was no stockpile. We found out the Trump administration didn't even know how many vaccine doses were out there. So, Joe Biden came out pretty aggressively with a bunch of executive orders around COVID. I think he's made the right decision pretty much at every turn in order to try to get vaccines out, to get us back to normal as much as we can try to, given that we're now racing against these variants. The British variant, more contagious, slightly more deadly, but it looks like the vaccines work against, but it's and I should be using the numbers because they tell us not to be pinning this to South Africa or Brazil, but the variants coming from there, are going to be perhaps a little more aggressive, and we're probably going to have to look at some boosting way to add to the vaccines. But we are in a race, and we have to get to that 75% vaccinated if we really are going to get beyond all of this. So I think the fact that Joe Biden now is getting many more vaccines, the fact that we are going to have a federal process, I think, running kind of parallel with the state processes. Wisconsin, it was rough in the very beginning, but they're doing a lot better now. I think the biggest thing is, without a national plan, it should be as simple as you can just put your name on a list, and when you're eligible, you would get notified. And right now, you have to call CVS's and Walgreens in order to find out what's going on. That's not a plan, and that's not going to get us out of this as quickly as we need to. So I'm glad there are federal initiatives to move this forward. I had an excellent conversation with Karen Timberlake, who I have a lot of confidence in, and I think she's already like, what are the best practices? We're just going to follow some of the best ideas out there because that is the smartest path. I'm very glad she's in that position, but it doesn't help when you've got a legislature, if you've got Larry, Darrell, and Daryl deciding today that we're not going to wear masks, that doesn't exactly help in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, and just as an aside, on February 15th, DHS, and Karen Timberlake is the new secretary of DHS, is rolling out an app in which people can register and when they're eligible will get contacted. So that should help. All right, now on to the stimulus bill. There's great debate, of course, about this. Biden came into office talking about bipartisanship, and you have worked with people on the other side of the aisle on many things too, but you're very much a progressive. So where do you come down on this idea? Must there be bipartisanship, or does the package as it stands, is that more important to pass?
I think the problem is, if you look at the last 2 years when Mitch McConnell was the leader, nothing that the House passed became law. They didn't do anything. And at the end of the day, people who don't live and breathe politics and watch WisPolitics briefings like this, honestly just want us to get something done, right? They want to know their family is going to be safe. They're getting back to normal. Kids can go back to school. They can go to concerts, etc. And we have to get something done. So if the Republicans want to work with us, they can do that. But if they're going to do the same thing they did when Barack Obama got elected and have a strategic plan not to work with someone, we're not going to kick at that football again because we've seen what's happened. So we are proceeding with reconciliation process that gets you a 50-vote threshold through the Senate rather than a 60-vote threshold only on fiscal related matters. So it does limit somewhat what you can do. But most importantly, it's to get a big COVID package out before March 15th when the unemployment extension ends. So, that's what we're doing tomorrow, and the Senate's taken up just to get the process going. But I think it's really crucial that we get this done. I've been more impressed with Joe Biden than I expected because he's come out with a lot of executive orders, but we've had to because of the inaction and the ineffectiveness, unfortunately, of Congress for the last several years. So, I want to get to a place where we get back to normal, the way that I think we operated when I was in the state legislature, and you could get things done in a bipartisan way, and you could disagree without being disagreeable. But doing nothing is absolutely not acceptable. So I think we're just trying to make sure we're doing what the American people need right now.
So I think what I heard you say there is, Republicans, you're welcome to come along, but at the end of the day, we're going to pass Biden's plan.
We're going to pass a plan, and that's the important part. We're not going to sit around and do nothing, right? Mitch McConnell was great at doing nothing the last 2 years, but right now you can't. I mean, we passed that second COVID bill back in May in the House, and it took till what? November, December to get a second bill scaled back significantly. In the meantime, 100,000 small businesses shuttered. Millions of people were unemployed at no fault of their own. We had 450,000 people die from a virus that shouldn't have happened because other countries didn't do it as foolishly as we did. Enough is enough. You've got to deal with both COVID and the economy, which are two really big problems right now. And this isn't a time to, worry about the process again. I mean, people who debate process, as usually are losing. We're going to get a product done because that's what people want.
Okay, now there's a lot of attention on the checks, right? The stimulus checks. $600 was in the most recent stimulus bill. This one has $1,400 checks, but there's a lot of talk about targeting that money more for lower incomes. Are you in favor of that?
I think that's going to be the debate that they're having right now. I mean, personally, I think we should just move ahead with what we promised, were $2,000 checks to folks at the levels that are currently out there. But I think that could be the debate. I mean, the interesting part is you can, imagine with 50-50 Senate, and our margin is significantly smaller in the House, especially in the Senate. Any one senator can really hold things up right now. And so I think that is going to be part of the debate, whether they do some different means testing. I don't think they're looking necessarily to stop checks. I think it's a matter of who gets the checks. That will be at debate.
All right. Another thing on my list is infrastructure. It really seems like this could be a bill, not in the stimulus bill, but another measure on infrastructure, updating infrastructure across the country. And I know you have been a fan of this, and were when you were in the state legislature, and we were dealing with the last Great Recession. So is that really going to happen, and what would it mean for Wisconsin?
I do think it'll really happen, finally. Remember every infrastructure week we had during the Trump administration that became another week of stupid tweets. This time, I think we can really get a bill done. I think you can get bipartisan support. And I think a lot of the focus will be on sustainable infrastructure, meaning looking at things that might have a more green aspect. So in addition to roads and bridges and schools, broadband, water delivery systems, a lot of other things that I think are absolutely necessary are going to happen, and it's going to have that sustainable aspect to it, so that we can have more dollars continue to be spent in the United States. So I'm looking forward to that conversation. I think we've got to first get this immediate package done, but I think there's already a lot of back channel conversations on what could be in a package. I'm hopeful that that's something that can bring people together, because everyone needs infrastructure dollars in their districts. And, if we can get the vaccines out and do everything we can on the health crisis and stop the bleeding of small businesses and people who are unemployed, and then we can help jumpstart the economy with a real investment in infrastructure, I think it will be one of the most impressive first 6 months of any presidency.
So when you do an infrastructure package, do you have to increase the federal gas tax, which hasn't been increased in 30 years or something like that?
I don't think that discussion is at that point yet, Jeff. I think right now we're just trying to figure what you need to get done and then how to best fund it. I remember when I was on the budget committee as a freshman, Paul Ryan was the chair, and he had someone in about charging miles per driven. And then, of course, a bunch of people found that very black helicopter-y. And, so I don't know how ultimately whatever is going to happen on the funding side. But that will obviously have to be a component, since we're going to be looking at a pretty serious investment right now in this first COVID bill.
All right. You were a co-chair of the Progressive Caucus in the most recent session. You're not there anymore. But what are some of the big progressive priorities? And, there was a lot of talk you mentioned before, but you think Biden's doing better than you thought. So I kind of read that as on some of the progressive issues, you think he's doing better.
Yeah, he's not a rookie, right? He didn't come in and have to figure out where the bathrooms are. He's like, oh yeah, I peed on the floor on that one before. He knows where everything is at. And he's showing it by getting out there and getting this stuff done. We're actually tackling a lot of big problems. Some of them are overturning executive orders of President Trump, expected. A lot of them are around COVID, which were absolutely essential and had to happen. And some others are moving forward in ways that, I wish Congress could move, but we're still probably with the tight margins going to not be able to move as quickly. But, we need to get this infrastructure package. I hope we can increase the minimum wage. It's been since 2009. That's pretty ridiculous that people, working full time would only make $15,000 a year and live below the poverty line. We have to address immigration, and that one again is an issue where I think there could be bipartisan support with a pathway to citizenship, as well as making sure we have adequate protections at our borders. I think expanding healthcare access is really big on my list, and I like the fact that Joe Biden wants to lower the age to access to Medicare. I hope we can even do a little more of that. So there's a lot of things that we'd like to be able to try to get done. And right now, again, I've been very impressed also with the outreach from the White House, Jeff. Often, as you know, legislative branch and executive branch are a little bit like this and don't necessarily always see eye to eye. I've been extremely impressed. My former deputy chief of of staff is now in the Ledge office at the White House, and she's been great to work with, Alicia. I just think that, right now I am seeing things that I didn't think I would see, which just makes me very happy. And, being on appropriations, I think we're bringing back earmarks, which will be helpful. I also recently got a waiver to serve on education and labor again. So I think one of only a couple people in the House of Representatives that serves on both the authorizing and appropriating committee for education and for labor issues. There's one member I think has that for ag. So I'm really looking forward to that. I think I'm getting another appointment soon that they had me on the floor speaking with that committee's time, but they haven't officially announced it yet. So, but that will be another interesting opportunity, I think, using my background as a small business owner. So it's, I'm looking forward to doing whatever I can to move these issues forward. And I'm excited about, I think, the prospects for the Congress.
All right. Well, I'm going to go into the audience questions because one of the audience questions is, what are the odds that earmarks will be reinstituted? And you just said that you think they're coming back.
Yeah, very high. I served on the modernization committee last year, which was an evenly split Dem-Republican committee. Nothing could advance without, I think we needed 2/3 support. And we supported a way to bring back more transparent, very important earmarks that don't go to private companies, but can go to government entities and some other exceptions. And in talking to Rosa DeLauro, who, by the way, was one of my mentors as a freshman and been a good friend, who's now the chair of the Appropriations Committee, it looks like we are going to bring something back that'll be done, I think, in a responsible way. But, I know that, probably in retrospect, Paul Ryan wishes they hadn't given those away because he could have got more done when the Tea Party just wanted to say no. This is a good tool to help get things done. And, any member of Congress should know more about their district than a DC bureaucrat. So I think, as long as it's done right, and I think the structure is to get it done right, it will be done. And I think that's going to be important moving forward.
Yeah, it would seem that it's a way to grease the skids on some things a little bit that might not happen otherwise. But there has to be, you have to guard against abuses in that too, as well.
And that's what we did. And for it to come out with a 2/3 vote on a completely Democrat Republican evenly split committee on the modernization committee, I think that sent the message, right? I think we set the right protocols, and I think Rose was talking about a couple little tweaks, but I think it will be done in a way that everyone always talks about the bridge to nowhere, and Alaska is the classic example. I think it was my freshman term. I had an outside the building meeting with a bunch of folks, and I used that as an example of what was wrong. And then someone raised their hand. They go, "Oh, I was the staff person who wrote that amendment." So that was interesting at that time. But
well, yeah, somebody had to write it, right?
Yeah,
that was big of that person own up to it, I guess.
But that's the problem, is when people don't even own up to the measures, then it's very likely not a good measure. But, I look at, one of the best places that we can put federal resources in Wisconsin, in my opinion, is the University of Wisconsin system. It helps our economics, helps our business community. It helps on education for so many people for opportunities. So, I can already see a number of opportunities where I think we can have some real progress made when they come back.
All right, there's a couple questions about January 6th. Maybe we'll just go with this one. What actions will the House take against House members who aided the January 6th insurrection?
Yeah, I think part of it is going to be on what comes out with these investigations. If anyone, for example, did give tours to people, like is one of the stories that's out there prior to that, clearly, I think that would set off a lot of people. But the emotions are really high around here. I'm up on the 7th floor of Longworth now. We moved this session to a new office, and I was under lockdown because I was in here preparing my remarks for when they were going to object to Wisconsin, which is what we were expecting that day. And Ron Kind, Gwenmore, and I were the 3 Wisconsin people. That's all we have. So we had a lot of work to do on that front. But one of the members from Cannon, because they twice evacuated Cannon, came and was working out of my office, a member from California that came in my class. And, when I talk to people now and I still see how high the tensions are, it really is impacting a lot. And this is still, it's hard to get around because now some of the QAnon folks have decided that March third or fourth or whatever day is now the day that Trump's going to come back. And so they now may keep this around here for a while. And none of that helps, right? Because it just keeps the elevated tensions. But just yesterday, I was on a call with about a half a dozen members, the co-chairs of the Labor Caucus. And one of the members said, boy, I just feel like everyone's so negative. And someone else was being really negative. And, you know me, I, of course, try to make a joke and made humor, and like everyone was a little happy to kind of let the shoulders go down, but there's a lot of that going on. So I think as we find out things, if someone did do that, I think there will be serious consequences for those members. On the Senate side, I think Hawley and Ted Cruz are definitely not in a good place with their colleagues right now for their actions. I mean, both of them are well-educated people who are acting like QAnon simpletons in order to try to run for president. That didn't fly. I think Tom Cotton might be the big victor out of that. Another one who wants to be president, who's smart enough to act a little differently. But tensions are high among members.
All right. Well, some of your Republican colleagues, and I don't have to name them, I think, have labeled the whole impeachment saga as a distraction. And as I think one member said, rubbing salt in the wounds of Trump supporters. So you voted for impeachment, and the trial is set to begin next week, I think. Is it a huge distraction, or do you still view it as necessary?
Well, it was just sedition. It was just an insurrection. First time you breached the U.S. Capitol since the War of 1812 when the British, only this time it wasn't another country, it was Donald Trump and his minions. I mean, that's an idiotic statement, right? And I understand I would want to turn the page if I was them too, but instead, they're not turning the page forward. They're turning the page to like a whole different book by embracing QAnon right now, right? It's becoming the Republican Civil War, I think, is something that they are going to have to really endure for a while because, Donald Trump, they clearly, I truly believe they became a cult of personality, and they did what Donald Trump wanted against their better judgment. And this is from many individual conversations with rational, reasonable Republicans, which there are. And the fact that now they're having this struggle, they were going to kick Liz Cheney out of leadership, and they gave a standing ovation yesterday to Q1. The Marjorie Taylor Greene, she and the Q2 over in Colorado, Boebert. I mean, it's a very different sort of mentality seizing the Republican Party, and I don't think it's wrong to address adequately what happened on January 6th and the fact that they don't want to. It's hard to, I think, have the progress without the accountability.
Okay, here's another question about the Keystone XL pipeline and Biden's action on that. Now, a lot of the Wisconsin Republicans have banded together to fight that move. Where do you stand on Keystone XL?
Well, I think the president made his decision just like the previous president made his decision to let it go ahead. This president said it's not. I think the real debate, Jeff, is what is the future of energy policy and job creation, right? That's why I think in the infrastructure package, there will be many opportunities for, and I'm a strong supporter of unions, good family supporting jobs, hopefully good union jobs, because I think those are important in the infrastructure package moving forward. But I've always thought, why are we sending so many dollars out of the United States, which we often do, especially on energy related costs, when we can produce, as you know, we had a tax exemption when I was the chair of the finance committee for making the big windmill blades that Scott Walker got rid of. Those aren't going to come over easy on a boat from China, right? You got to make them near where they're going. And those can be good paying manufacturing jobs right in Wisconsin because we're in middle wind territory. Solar cells now, there's much more the technology that can allow you to produce these in the United States, not just in China. And those are good manufacturing jobs. We need to really figure out how to have more manufacturing jobs that really have hurt not just Wisconsin, but many states' economies, especially in the rural areas. A lot of the rural parts of my district, a couple decades ago, lost that last manufacturer that gave them those good family supporting jobs. So now either you're an agrarian economy or a home-based business. And if you don't have broadband, you may not even have a home-based business. And, there's a lot of challenges challenges out there, which is, I think, part of why we see some of the voting behavior we see in some of our rural parts of Wisconsin. So I would like to see us really do a lot more of infrastructure, including things like allowing stronger investments in wind and solar and biomass and other jobs that are good, family supporting, should be unionized jobs that will help to make up for some of what is now not going to proceed because of Joe Biden's action. But again, just remember, it was Donald Trump's action that let it go ahead. Now it's Joe Biden's that's stopping it. And, it hasn't been an act of Congress.
Right. Right. But Congress could overturn it, could it not?
But unlikely with the majorities you have right now. I don't. It's going to be tough to see much, Jeff. Just in general, it's going to be tough to see many pieces of legislation move forward. You're going to see, I think, more things done in big bills like budget bills and like the package we're doing on COVID because of how tight the margins are. I mean, there's so many special interests. Just the pharmaceutical industry alone, there are over 1,500 pharmaceutical lobbyists in Washington, D.C. That's enough for 3 for every member of the House and Senate. I don't know who my 3 are, but it just shows the problem on any piece of legislation. If one of those 1,500 people gets to 1 senator or a handful of House members, something's not going to proceed. So I think you're not going to see a lot of individual action. We're going to be working on things like budget bill. That's why I'm so glad to be on appropriations. One, it's a pretty normal committee with pretty normal traditional Republicans, and we actually all get along pretty well. And I have respect for many of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle on the committee. But also that's where the action is going to happen because of these tight margins. So, while there's lots of hypotheticals, well, couldn't Congress do this or that? I mean, 50-50 Senate, that's all you got to say. It's going to show how some of those things aren't going to proceed.
All right, here's a question from an audience member. You have been an open critic of the level of spending in the Pentagon. Wisconsin, though, has a strong group of military companies, military-based companies like Oshkosh Corp and Fairbanks Morse and Marinette Marine. Are you concerned that Pentagon cuts could adversely affect these important Wisconsin employers?
No. First of all, where we're talking and where we're looking at it are things that I think everyone, you could find much more agreement. I can't say everyone, but you find much more agreement. And first of all, we don't get many of those dollars back in Wisconsin, just for the record. We actually quite a bit less than many other areas. But what we're talking about things are like the OCO, the slush fund, the overseas contingency account that is out there. That's almost $70 billion. If you just put that back into the defense budget and kept the spending where you're at, that's a 10% reduction in what really was a slush fund, because we don't audit really and keep track of Pentagon spending like we do every other kind of spending in federal government. I think we have that responsibility to do that, but that's one thing we could do. 2, we spend a lot of money with contracted employees as opposed to actually Army personnel. And there's a lot of these firms that have popped up, not from Wisconsin, that are providing those services now that I think is a bad expenditure. There's a number of things around nuclear weapons that recently, just in the last 4 years, Donald Trump decided to greatly increase what we were doing in nuclear weapons at a time, really, those aren't the weapons that anyone wants to use by choice, that we could scale back. So there's a lot of things we can identify that won't have any effect on those very good providers in Wisconsin, but would certainly provide a way to have some savings that just on that OCO fund alone, $70 billion spent on housing or education or go down the list would be spent in a way that I think more people in Wisconsin would feel a positive impact. And that's what we're shooting for. And don't forget also, for 10 years, we haven't talked like this because the sequester. If you cut defense discretionary spending, you also cut non-defense. So if you actually cut defense, stupid programs in defense, you cut programs in education and healthcare as well. Even if everyone agreed the program is stupid, that was a dumb law that was made before I got to Congress. That's gone now. So we can now address this without having a ripple effect of everything else. And I think that's one of the unique opportunities we're facing.
Okay, well, that explains sequestering. I didn't know it was gone, but thank you for noting that. All right, now here's a question from somebody on higher ed. Is there an appetite for continued support for our students that have been affected by the pandemic? As an access institution, our students come from modest means and have support. Having support financially and through student support services is critical to students to achieve their academic goals. So what about, I mean, maybe that also goes to student debt too. What is the Education Committee doing, or what could be in the COVID bill in terms of helping higher ed students?
Well, right now, we've kind of frozen payments and interest from accruing during this really difficult time. But there's a big move to not just get rid of there's a big move to get rid of student debt, period, in Congress. Again, with the margins we have, I don't know how that will proceed. My concerns are just making sure that we can continue to support many of these financial aid programs so that people can continue to get that higher education. I myself, as someone who got Pell Grants and things like that to help me, I don't think I should pull the ladder up now that I got a chance to get help from those. And I think those programs and Perkins and others are vitally important. I also think, and I'm just going to add this, we've got a number of nonprofit private institutions that we're trying to make sure also are going to get some help in the COVID bill because they were excluded. So Beloit College and Edgewood and some others. So I'm hopeful in our conversations on that front. But, I think we need to do as much as possible to make sure that anyone who has the ability isn't held back financially from getting a higher education. At the same time, I'm also a very strong supporter. Tomorrow I'll be on the floor debating a bill to try to continue work on apprenticeships. And I think that's also valid for people who aren't getting the higher education because it's about 30% and growing, obviously. But this is another path to having a good family supporting job. And I think, we need to talk about both of those together or else you kind of are asking people to have things compete against each other.
Okay, let me just clarify a little bit on the student debt question. So do you think that student debt should be actually decreased, not just the payments, frozen? Do you think that there should be some sort of relief, I guess, for those who are carrying a lot of debt, because a lot of those are affecting people on the lower end of the wage scale?
Yeah, I do. But I'll be honest. The problem is, I asked the question recently, what is, someone proposed getting rid of $50,000 worth of everyone's debt. And I said, how much will that cost? And they're like, well, we don't really know. I kind of like to know things like that. And, coming from my background on, joint finance and appropriations, those are things you kind of have to have and are part of the discussion. But it does highlight, the problem we have with growing debt currently because of the cost of education, and we don't want to stop anyone from getting that education. So I think, I was always a proponent of a bill that addressed not just tuition, but also all expenses, because there's also books and there's living expenses, et cetera, and how to try to make it so that you could attend a four-year public institution at no cost. Debt-free college is what we called it. I still think that's a valid idea as well, because it's not just the tuition that can hold people back. But, ultimately, we all benefit as a society if people get a higher education and can use that to get a better job and be able to support their family. So, I think a big conversation does need to happen on education in general, higher education in general.
All right. Now, here's a question on the ACA. What are Democrats doing to make sure ACA stays around and expands? And I would just note that there's a new enrollment period that the Biden administration has allowed mid-February to mid-May. So anyway, what other things should be done, will be done on ACA?
So I think Joe Biden's going to be the leader on this because he's already said he wants to expand the ACA to have a public option, to lower the access to Medicare down to 60. He's had a number of provisions he talked about. And, given how swiftly he's operating right now, I think he's going to drive the train, especially given how tight our margins are in Congress on this. So I think you should look for ACA not just to be shored up, but to be expanded. And I think that ultimately is going to be a good thing for people to have access to healthcare.
Will there be a sweetener to get states to expand Medicaid? Wisconsin continues to be one that probably won't expand it because of the Republican legislature. But will there be sweeteners to help get states like Wisconsin to expand Medicaid?
Yeah, I mean, I hope we continue what we did as sweeteners previously for states, because obviously that brought a number of Republican states in to do the right thing. Unfortunately, Wisconsin was not one of them. I think it would be hard to have an enhanced sweetener for people who had bad behavior. I think other states, we would have some difficulty getting that done. But honestly, it makes so much sense to expand Medicaid in Wisconsin. This is another one of those things that's a philosophical fight that's great, I'm sure, at a QAnon rally, but not to someone who's desperately trying to get health care for their family. So, I'm hoping that, if we can get a redistricting process that can end gerrymandering in Wisconsin, and I'm not, completely confident yet, but it's, let's face it, it's going to the courts, right? We already know that. If we can see a more fair set of maps that can actually make the legislature more competitive, honestly, I think everyone benefits from that. That will help us to make sure that things that are pretty common sense could get done.
Yes, this is one of the questions here was about redistricting and, what can be done to make the legislative districts more politically competitive, or even, there's only one real competitive congressional district also in the state, and that's Ron Kynes. Usually the congressionals kind of take care of themselves in terms of making sure that, their races go the incumbent way. But, yes, it would be in the courts, but I mean, will the courts really redraw the lines and make them, given what the U.S. Supreme Court did not do, will the courts jump in there and really redraw the lines as you want them to be?
I don't think they could do any worse than the lines in Wisconsin, right? Because they're so seriously gerrymandered right now. But I think people really have to think, long and hard about gerrymandering has caused us to have QAnon, has caused us to have a Tea Party. And on the left, I'm sure you could say it's caused us to have whatever people aren't happy with there. But when you have, 80% of the districts that are only competitive inter-party versus, Dem versus Republican, that's not a good thing at any level. And that's why, I think a citizen panels is in many ways the best way to do this, because it is hard to ask a member of the Assembly or the State Senate or a member of Congress, we're not objective when we look at the district. I remember those discussions from being in the state legislature for 14 years. Your cousin Vinny, you wanted in your district, and they lived in a town that's maybe 20 miles outside your district, but for whatever irrational reason, members are arguing for that, or they think because, they used to work at the ice cream store in that town, it's going to be good for their votes. That's not a great way to do redistricting. And, following the principles of redistricting and having it done in a more objective way benefits everyone. You don't have extremism at any level. It's a much better way to try to guarantee you don't have those problems. And I just wish that would be, as I look back at things, from being local, state, and federal government, this is one of the biggest changes that would make things better for everyone if we got done.
Right. It would definitely lessen the extremism in certain primaries, or getting people worried about getting caught from the right or the left in a primary. I don't think it'd mean instant democratic control of the legislature, though.
No, you know what? I don't care. I want something that doesn't make us just appeal in 80% of the time to inter-party fights, because face it, 12%, maybe up to 20% at most of the people will vote in that inter-party fight, which is why you get QAnon electing members of Congress in red districts. And that's dangerous for democracy, right? At the end of the day, it's not getting done what we need to. So there's no question by our votes in Wisconsin, you would have a closer legislature. And I think you'd be back to sometimes Democrats might be in control, sometimes Republicans might be in control, but you probably wouldn't have a debate on the floor of the Assembly right now to throw out a mask mandate if you had normal people in the Assembly and Senate. Right now, I'm not sure if everyone is all that normal.
I don't know what, well, that could be a normal test. I'm not sure what the normal test would be.
It's not batshit crazy. How's that?
Okay. All right. Let's, you have another, thank you for fitting us in today with, the votes were unexpected and you actually have a committee meeting coming up. I just want to end with a purely political question, and it's about, your future. So there's two big races in 2022. In fact, you already took your name out of the one as a possibility of running for the U.S. Senate, and I guess I don't know. Do you expect Governor Evers will be running for re-election?
I think Governor Evers is running for re-election. I think he's done a good job, especially in a really tough time. I mean, I can't imagine anyone trying to be governing during COVID and with such a difficult time with the legislature, but I think he's done everything in his power to try to, make Wisconsin in a good shape during this time. I mean, on the Senate race, there's going to be a Democratic primary. There's a number of really good people, I think, who are looking at it. And if Ron Johnson decides to break his promise and run, the last year he's gone full Rojo, right? Like, this is not the Ron Johnson that always was, a little different, but you could work with. And in the last year, I've seen just some enormous changes in his behavior. And I think a lot of it, Trump fomented that. If someone had a little bit of it, it really grew in them. And, watching what he's done, especially turning down those checks to the American people, I think are going to make it hard for him to get reelected. So I think Democrats are going, even though it's that off midterm election, if we solve COVID and the economy gets going, they might be in a pretty good position to beat him. If not, I think, open seat, we still have a good shot, but it's all going to depend who all the candidates are. But I wanted to just get out there early because, I'm making seniority on appropriations. I'm getting a whole bunch done that doesn't require introducing bills because that's what you do in the appropriation process. And, I just took on a third appropriation committee. I got rid of the third one I had last session, energy and water, and went to financial services. And all of my subcommittees, I'm basically next in line to be a subcommittee chair, which we call the Cardinals, around here. If anyone leaves another committee. So basically, like, even the one I just got on, the three people in front of me are subcommittee chairs, and one of them is 80, I think. So really, the way the game works here is you've got to be willing to stay with some seniority. That's how you can get to a position where you can even have a greater effect. And, I love the work I do on appropriations now. So that's why I just wanted to say early, I had no interest. I will occasionally tweet about Ron Johnson because I think he's done some really interesting things in the last year. That term I'm using really loosely. I want to make sure that, we have a senator who's actually getting some stuff done for Wisconsin. And, on the governor's side, I look forward to Governor Evers running for re-election.
Yeah. So what you're telling everybody is, from your personal standpoint, your personal career, being in the House and using the seniority track on important committees is the best thing for you and for your district and for Wisconsin, I guess, right?
Yeah, I've never been about titles. I've been about getting stuff done, and that is the best path. I am a huge fan of Dave Obey. I mean, Dave Obey, has done more for Wisconsin than probably all but a few people in the last century. I mean, he really did a tremendous service to the people. And I look at, what he got done, and I saw the path that he's done. I look at Congress and how it operates. Either I can go on a committee where all you do is fight all day and, make sure I get several 100,000 Twitter followers, or I can go on a committee where I can actually affect policy more, because to me, where you invest your money is where your priorities are. And that's so important through the Appropriations Committee. That's what I did on Joint Committee on Finance. That's what I'm trying to do now with appropriations. And, ultimately at the end of the day, I think, Wisconsin and absolutely the second district benefit. I've made no secret of it that, the UW system is very, very important to me. And if I can find ways to help deliver dollars that are priorities for the university system, that benefits the business community, that benefits students, that benefits people getting jobs, because we're doing some new programming that might help in the spin-off of jobs, as we've seen, especially in Dane County. So I just want to get it done. And, I love, still being very involved in Wisconsin issues. I spend a lot of my time, I'll be honest, on Wisconsin COVID stuff, because I feel very passionately about, making sure people aren't getting sick and dying. As you know, my mom, 91, was exposed to COVID, never had a single symptom, which is great. And I'm very happy about that. But I know all too many other people who, have had really tough complications. And much of this was avoidable. And so I'm going to keep working to try to get things done in Wisconsin. And I think, it may not get me the headlines. I don't rush to a camera. I'm not the first guy to tackle someone to get to a camera here in Washington, because, that doesn't deliver resources for the state of Wisconsin.
Well, if your goal is to be the next Dave Obey and as a pipeline for money to Wisconsin, I think a lot of people would say hooray for that. Although you might have to learn how to play the banjo and
harmonica. He's the harmonica guy.
No, he's the harmonica guy. Oh God, I got that wrong. He'll probably call me now. All right. Okay. Well, anyway, thank you, Congressman Mark Pocan. Want to thank our sponsors for this event: WPS Health Solutions, XL Energy, Exact Sciences, Michael Best Strategies, and our partners, of course, UW-Madison and the University of Wisconsin Alumni Association. Also, our events coming up February 18th with the Joint Finance Co-Chairs, March 4th with the Democratic Minority Leaders, April 15th with Senate Majority Leader Lemieux, and we have a standing invitation for Governor Evers, and his staff is working on that. So we want to thank Congressman Pocan today. Thank you very much. Have a good rest of your day. And this is Jeff Mayers signing off now for the WisPolitics virtual event of the day. Thank you.
Take care, everybody. Thanks.